Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. At the Monroe County Commissioners meeting on October 25th, Commissioner Penny Githens gave an update on the jail and which aspects of the project are currently being worked on.
Well, I'd like to give an update on the jail. I'd like to repeat for the public that we have not identified a location yet, and we're continuing to explore different options. We did receive a 245-page report with a Phase 1 environmental site assessment on the Thompson property, which we are currently in the process of trying to dig through, and we're still awaiting a geotechnical report, I believe. We are pulling together a web page on the county's website to keep the community apprised of our progress as we pull different things together. Also, we hope next year to get the National Association of Mental Illness, Indiana, to come and work with us on using what's called a SIMS model to, gee, that's not our screen. Wonder what's going on here in front of us, sorry. To look for gaps that we have here in the community so that we can start to work on filling those gaps, especially with regard to treatment for mental illness and substance use disorders. And the connection that we have with the criminal justice, those have with the criminal justice system. I will say too that last Thursday and Friday, we had Jamie Whitaker down from Mental Health of America, Indiana. He is the forensics program vice president for that group, and he was here to talk with us about the integrated reentry and correctional support program. Finally remembered that one. And trying to get that here into our community. So we'll be moving forward on that. We have to create some other entities to make that possible. And finally, we have planned a visit to the new Jefferson County Jail. This jail is not yet open, but it will be soon. And we have invited to go along with us some of the county staff, as well as members of the Sheriff's Department and the County Council. So this is just part of our due diligence in terms of what we think we would like to see in a jail.
Later, Personnel Administrator Elizabeth Sensenstein asked the commissioners to approve the 2024 Anthem Medical Plan Summary for Monroe County employees.
This is the annual renewal of our Anthem stuff. So the first, there's many pages. The first several of those are the benefit summaries. So they just outline all of the coverage for each of our plans. None of that has changed from what you had approved last year. And then I think the next item after that is the stop loss agreement. And so that's just our, the stop loss is the protection for us against those high claims. And then the final thing for Anthem is the administrative services agreement. And that's for them to, the administrative costs for managing our plan.
Commissioner Julie Thomas thanked Sensenstein for the work that was done. Sensenstein highlighted the work of Commissioners Administrator Angie Purdy for bargaining to keep the price of insurance as stable as possible amidst rising costs.
I will just say that there is a lot of information.
Yes.
And what that tells me is that you all have spent a lot of time on this, and we appreciate the hard work that goes into finalizing all of these documents, so thank you.
Yeah, I think I would give credit to Angie there for working with our benefit brokers at Apex to, doing a good job at keeping our costs from increasing too much. I think in general, the insurance costs are going up more and more since COVID, and we've done a very good job of keeping things pretty much status quo.
The commissioners unanimously approved the medical plan summary. Next, the commissioners heard from County Attorney Jeff Cockrell about Ordinance 2023-44 to amend Monroe County Code to include the collective bargaining agreement with highway workers.
When we started the negotiations, we saw that our current code recognized the merit deputies and the jail collective bargaining agreement, but there wasn't anything with the highway union in our Monroe County Code that recognized them. It was always done through the contract. They indicated that they would prefer it in the code. I would prefer it in the code as well, so we just make sure we have them all uniform and recognize them the same way. And so this is just kind of taking a couple of the provisions that were previously in our code, which says who's in the union, who, and those kind of things, and just putting it and formally recognizing it in our Monroe County Code.
The commissioners unanimously approved the ordinance and the bargaining agreement. The commissioners also approved a feasibility study for the current jail. The agreement with RQAW was for $40,000 to study possible alternatives to the construction or reconstruction of the county jail. Cockrell explained what prompted the study.
And this is kind of an outcrop of two different ideas. One is when we got our jail studies back in, I think, 2021, we had public engagement meetings, but they weren't noticed as public hearings. And Indiana Code 36-1-1819 requires a public hearing to discuss the feasibility. And those reports were also much broader than just the jail feasibility. Yeah. They included some, the courts, they included the community, and so it was much broader. And it's 2023, and it just seems like society has changed more since we contracted for that first study to now than it had changed in my lifetime in that short of a period of span. So what we wanted to do is get a pure jail feasibility study that would comply with the code. We wanted to use a vendor that was not the one we were chosen to utilize for the design of a new facility, because we had heard from the public and that they would consider that potentially a conflict of interest, and we don't want even the appearance of impropriety in this. I think we think, and then when we get this back, we will have a public hearing to discuss it pursuant to the state code.
Commissioner Githens asked how long it would take to complete the study. Cockrell explained that it is set to take 2 months. However, he noted that we are approaching the holiday season and it might take a little longer than the estimated time frame.
It looked like to me that this would be about 2 months for this to be completed.
I think typically that sounds about right, but you got to remember that the next 2 months involves a lot of time when people aren't working. So you've got Thanksgiving, you've got Christmas, you've got New Year's. So I don't want to hold them to 2 months. I'd rather they do a thorough job and get us a report that has been well thought out and reviewed everything, as opposed to trying to push them through, the holidays to get something accomplished.
Once the project is complete, the county will hold a public hearing on this feasibility study. At the Bloomington Board of Public Works meeting on October 24th, the board heard a request for an abatement at 2501 East 8th Street from Housing and Neighborhood Development Neighborhood Compliance Officer Rob Council.
This property is covered in litter. I've submitted pictures for the packet that I'm sure you guys have taken a look at. As I stated yesterday in the work session, the property owner just needs help. He needs help tackling this mess. I spoke to him today. He admitted as much. He knows that it's a mental issue, and he has trouble addressing it. He's at the point where it's too big for him to solve. So I'm asking you tonight to approve my abatement for that property. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Board member Elizabeth Karen asked if there's anything the city can do to further support the individual, since they said they were struggling with mental health issues. Council responded.
Is there anything that Han can do or city departments can do to assist this gentleman with some of his mental health concerns, because he is stating that this is a concern, and I'm just wondering if there's anything that we can do to be supportive in addition to just the monetary fines?
Yes, ma'am, and that's part of the history of this issue. I've been working with him for the last year and a half on this.
Great.
I have referred him to the Stride Center and also to Centerstone as far as getting some help there. He's kind of wishy-washy on whether or not he would accept it, but I'm going to keep trying to push for that. We do have a pretty good working relationship, this fella and I.
Board President Kyla Cox-Deckard asked if the resident was present to speak on the abatement. Council said the resident was not in attendance. The board unanimously approved the abatement. During the October 24th meeting of the Monroe County Community School Corporation, the school board halted a policy that would have created new high school schedules for the 2025-26 school year. Vice President of the school board, April Hennessy, introduced a motion which would designate scheduling as a board voting matter rather than a decision made by the superintendent.
In light of process problems over the course of high school scheduling alignment, I recommend that the MCCSC Board of School Trustees take this matter on as a voting issue to ensure a programmatic, thoughtful, and ethical review of the issues, the solutions, and stakeholder input. My criteria to ensure that this happens are as follows. Focus groups should be conducted as planned to gain insight, hear feedback, and collect data. Data should be shared both with the board and the community in a transparent and timely manner. A Citizens Advisory Committee should be formed according to MCCSC Board Policy Manual 9140 to help evaluate data, research both the issue and potential solutions, and recommend their course of action to the district and the board. The union should be consulted for their stakeholder feedback and input as is customary, either by law or by the will of the board to do so. The timeline for the implementation should be revised for a 2025-2026 implementation at the earliest, but may be extended depending on the time necessary for thorough evaluation of the issues and teacher preparation of curricula, should alignment be the final outcome. In a situation where the data are not immediately available or are unclear, conflicting, or sparse, due diligence is required. This situation warrants such a process to gather further data and provide research-driven solutions toward measurable outcomes for the best interest of all of our students.
Hennessy continued to provide her rationale behind the motion and expressed her frustration with the way the process has played out so far.
I am also gravely concerned and frustrated with the way this process has rolled out. The lack of transparency, data, manageable timeline, and meaningful stakeholder input is, in my perspective, egregious and does not avoid those unacceptable choices, conditions, and activities. From the start of this process, I have called for us to lead with open communication and data and to engage the community in meaningful input and conversations. Those requests have fallen largely on deaf ears or have been met too late, in my opinion, or without true ethical intent. The letter on Friday made clear that a plan does and has existed despite the fact that I was told and this community was told that there was no plan. The letter, the superintendent's letter, which came out earlier this month by way of Parent Square, stated that a student, teacher, and community input will be received prior to the design of a new schedule. The fragile trust that had been generated by the announcement of focus groups has been obliterated and has not only put the upcoming referendum at risk, but I fear all other referenda at risk as well. The board has been elected and endowed with the authority to exercise their best judgment in determining policies, making decisions, and approving procedures for carrying out the responsibility. We all know that we will have to make decisions that are often unpopular or difficult, but I would ask of you to consider how we execute that responsibility. I'd ask that we do so with a process that is above board, that builds trust rather than diminishes it, and does so in a way that is data informed, measurable, and collaborative with the stakeholders who've entrusted us to lead. That is the reason for the motion before you today.
Superintendent Dr. Jeff Hauswald said the proposed scheduling changes were introduced because of equity concerns. Board member Ashley Pirani asked how those concerns were taken into account.
So speaking first regarding South schedule, this term and concept of tracking, we began identifying that. We began studying what that meant, and what that means is that, and I think it was Vice President Hennessy mentioned a lot of letters they've received. We have two, and what that means is that, not to take anything away from the 45 voices tonight, but the practice that we are doing is that we have a lot of classes that require 3 trimesters, and this is the design of the school. Some require 2, and so what happens is when students are selected to be in English 9 and English 10 versus Honors English 9 or other iterations of that, they are required to take what the school calls long classes. And because of that, that ties up a significantly larger number of their courses. And that's very different than taking 2 semesters or 2 trimesters and then repeating if additional knowledge is meant to be learned. In other words, we are specifically identifying upfront students that we believe need 50% more time in a class for the same curriculum. And so what we started, this comes to the equity conversation. When we looked at that, we identified that, for example, students, as the state's term, free reduced lunch, or more complex students. We oftentimes say students of poverty from disinvested communities. What we began to learn is that because of this practice, there were inequities, and that is that those students had received so many and so many classes in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, English 9, English 10, English 11, that was taking away a significant number of credits, which oftentimes go for electives. Now, when they still follow the path of course requirements, so you have your science classes and your social studies classes, foreign language, for example, if you want to work towards an honors diploma in those classes, we realized that suddenly, if you think about those 6 classes, there were 6 more a significant number of more credits for students that were on a more high ability track. And it did correlate with students of poverty, for example. Also a significant correlation for students with disabilities. And a lot of students tonight have talked about how much they love the arts. Now, don't take away the arts. They've talked about how much they love other electives. A lot of students have shared with me in emails that they wanted to take weights at Bloomington South, but they were told they couldn't because they had required courses. We had emails from students saying that they wanted to take courses in the arts. So we understand that arts are rich at South, but our team, we have an equity team at our district office, began to identify that the structure was limiting a lot of students from that. And so that was a concern. The concern wasn't that, the concern wasn't necessarily what the right schedule was, but we did identify that we had concerns for the current schedule and the practice.
45 parents and students shared their concerns about the policy during public comment. Rebecca Baxter, a sophomore at Bloomington High School South, said she does not believe equity concerns would be solved with identical schedules.
I'm addressing the schedule change, and I would like to apologize for repeating topics, but I have new evidence and reasoning that I would like to be heard. Specifically today, I would like to address the email the board sent out Friday. While helpful on some level, this email failed to address several issues brought up by students and teachers thoroughly. As many students have already said, and as stated in both teacher letters to the board, the issues with equity in our schools will not be resolved by identical schedules. And I do believe this is well known by the board. In their email to the community, the board addressed how the current practice of attending classes an average of 2.5 days a week at North disproportionately impacts our priority populations. However, this makes no sense considering how the proposed schedule change would offer each class the same amount of time on a block schedule. And very ironically, the acknowledgement of inequity within one school that uses the same schedule for every student shows how an identical schedule doesn't solve the equity issues the board is concerned about. And equity like this is a lot harder to achieve than equality, like mentioned. In this situation, we'd likely have to expand the bus system majorly to achieve it. But when you take time to think about it, the administration's bias in this situation is obvious. In that hypothetical, it would lie on the administration to find funding and shuffle around bus routes. In this change, it falls directly and almost exclusively on teachers to restructure their entire curriculum in under 9 months' notice. Most will have 2 or 3 different classes to do this for, and all will do so on unpaid time. The people making this decision are not the ones that it will impact. I know over half of the board members' terms will expire in 2024 before this decision is seen in action, and I ask the members of the board to prioritize the legacy they will hold in this community in their decision, regardless of whether they will return to serve us in 2025. I also ask the board to prioritize transparency. It's very clear to everyone here that we were not really meant to have a real voice in this, and actions taken now do not fix that. The administration continues to use data that we cannot verify, and given all that's happened in this past month, we don't exactly feel compelled to trust them to supply us with all the data that is available. Saying that they have brought up all relevant data and that they value our opinions after all this is tacky at best and patronizing at worst. And if they were simply too rushed in writing the notice of this change to send it out in time for us to prepare for the board meeting the next day last month, maybe that says something about how rushed this decision is. I ask the board again to prioritize our input, prioritize data, and prioritize functional equity. And I sincerely hope that the superintendent's decision will reflect these priorities. Thank you all very much.
Later in the meeting, board member Aaron Coopersmith attempted to table the motion. It did not receive a second and failed. The board voted 4-3 in favor of shifting the authority of scheduling changes away from the superintendent and to the school board as a voting matter. No scheduling changes will be made prior to the 2025-26 school year. At the Richland Bean Blossom School Board meeting on October 23rd, the 2024 budget was unanimously adopted, and the Director of Teaching and Learning Ready Schools, Jennifer Barrett, reported on a $56,000 grant that the school district received.
We are working in the EJHS Design Lab, trying to make it safer for staff and students. What I mean by that is we're putting about $4,000 into updating the HVAC exhaust fan in there, as well as the dust collection system that we currently use. That is the least exciting part of what we're doing with these funds, by far. We're also, the kids are designing and building mobile kiosks that will be used for all of our student-run businesses. So you'll start seeing those literally roll out for basketball games, after-school events, and you will see our kids there working as you are coming into games or anything like that. Do not be surprised if you see a nice big monitor showing you the latest apparel or the latest products that can be created by our student-run businesses, and make sure that you stop and buy something because we are counting on you for those sales. We also are buying some additional tools for metalworking at the junior high lab, some additional Prusa 3D printers. One piece I'm super excited about is robotics is no longer just an after-school club at the junior high. Miss Kelly Grimes has about 75 students signed up for after school, which is incredible. But there's a whole other population of students that are already very busy after school. And so what happens is we have our robotics club, and we have our kids who play sports and other after school activities. And so what happens is there is a split, and you can't do both. And so Kelly, and along with the junior high administration and counseling team, they are actually going to offer robotics next year as an elective in 7th grade for those students. So we are purchasing not just VEX IQ competition kits for our competition teams, but now classroom bundles for those students that are interested in coding and programming, but don't necessarily have that time after school to be able to do that. In addition, we are getting into the plastics business, and that does not mean cosmetics. We are getting into what's called precious plastics, and this is such a tremendous opportunity for our kids. We are actually purchasing the equipment to build a commercial-grade shredder to put down in the makerspace at EPS and EIS. What that will look like is over the next several months, we'll be working on this process where we will be taking plastic recyclables from our community, shredding those down. Our little guys will be sorting and doing all of those pieces. And then we're going to take those up to the high school where we have an extruder, which is just a fancy word for a heater, and molding all of those down, melting them down, and molding them into large plastic sheets. And that becomes material then that we use for furniture design, jewelry, keychains. So instead of purchasing the plastic that our kids will be using, we're going to start taking those products and actually doing something with that and creating that ourselves. Then the best part is those semi-finished products go right back down to EPS and EIS, and they put the finishing touches on them down there with customization with their Cricut machines, things like that, so that all 3 of our labs are now going to be involved in our student-run businesses. In addition, you will see some embroidery options coming out from ILC Designs that will be delivered here in the next week or 2, and we will have capabilities just like any commercial business in our area. We'll have a 14-color embroidery machine that we'll be learning how to use for hats, sweatshirts, you name it, bags, we can embroider on it. We will have a screen printing business up and running by next school year. After our Edge moves over into their new space, that will become our screen printing area for the next part of ILC Designs. And in addition to that, we are continuing to invest in our PBL cohort support to make sure that our teachers are continuing to learn how to teach in ways that make the content engaging and relative to what the students are doing day in and day out.
The next Richland Bean Blossom School Board meeting will be held on November 20th at 6 p.m. At the Ellettsville Town Council meeting on October 23rd, the council discussed Ordinance 2023-15, a general obligation bond ordinance on property tax in Ellettsville. The general obligation bond would go toward funding a new maintenance facility for the town. An advisor from Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors, Principal Matt Eckerly, was brought in to explain the intricacies of the ordinance and the impact the general obligation bond would have on property taxes.
When you layer on this proposed bond issue and the debt service levy for that, you are seeing, we're estimating a tax rate of approximately 6.6 cents per $100 of assessed value, or a difference of about 2.47 cents per $100 of assessed value. What does that mean to the average taxpayer? The median home value in Ellettsville, based on the most recent census data released, was $166,600. When you account for the homestead deduction, the supplemental homestead deduction, you apply that 2.47 cent difference to a net value of $77,090. That results in an annual impact of about $19.
Council President William Ellis clarified that this general obligation bond would be a continuation of a previous bond and said that due to the increase in new developments, residents likely will not see an increase in their property taxes. He explained that this is because the town expects to establish $6 million worth of additional property tax assessment value, which would be added to the tax rolls in January of 2024.
We actually put that towards some of our property tax assessments. And what we found is that the assessment growth that this new rate's going to impact is we have about $6 million worth of new assessment, new properties coming on. So the current taxpayers, they're really not going to see any, on average, I mean, obviously you can't get it down to the micro level.
Yeah.
But on average, they're not going to see any change from this because this is just flipping over an existing bond, and that extra tax growth, the actual new construction that's finally getting on the tax rolls, has lowered it.
Eckerly responded, saying that the $19 increase only takes into account the current property values. He said that the addition of new property could take the burden off of current taxpayers. However, Eckerly said it is not a guarantee that residents will not see any increases given the variety of factors that play into tax rates.
Obviously, there's different levers turning on different properties, and plus you don't know what the tax rates are going to do for the county, the library, the school district. There's a lot of those gears, but when you're just isolating this.
Eckerly added that Baker Tilly will continue to monitor the town's assessed value as the town continues to grow.
Overall, that's what we're estimating. Obviously, if you continue to see the assessed value growth in the community in future years, that's going to put additional downward pressure. Obviously, there's no guarantees on that front, but I did drive by a lot of new construction on my way into town today that looks like it's going to be assessed as of January 1 of 24. So we'll continue to monitor that as you're developing future budgets and completing additional financial plans, and just see how all of this operates.
The ordinance was unanimously approved without council discussion or public comment. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.